How's it going, everybody? My name is Seth Juarez, and as you know, open source, the reason why I love Ashley's talk is because it talks about contributing and how to actually contribute. And I'm here with Ryan Parks, who actually is from the place where a lot of contribution happens. Why don't you introduce yourself a little bit, my friend?
I am. So yes, thank you, Seth. I'm Ryan Parks. I'm a solutions engineer at GitHub. So I've been there about 3 years. And my role is basically making sure that people know how to use GitHub, helping them use GitHub, helping companies change how they make software. So it's very much in line with the themes that Ashley was talking about.
So in the context of open source, though, GitHub has taken off. Why do you think that is?
I think it's because it offered a different and new way of working together that excited people and captured their imagination. That's certainly why I was attracted to GitHub and why I started using it before I worked there.
So my horror story, every dev has this horror story. I was using this automated tool and I automatically wrote some stuff to a directory and it deleted all my source code. This was like 8 years ago. And it was at that moment that I decided it's time to use source control. So if you're not using source control, shame on you, you're gonna be like me, and that code is still actually out there and I can't fix it ever because I don't have it unless I rewrite it. But GitHub is different than source control. It has source control, but there's a little bit more special sauce. Why don't you tell us about that, and then tell us a little bit about how one would use these workflows, these open source workflows in the enterprise.
Sure, yeah, so I'm gonna be talking about something that we call InnerSourcing today. That's gonna be the topic of my talk today. And I have a few slides. It's not too many, I promise it won't bore anyone. But I wanted to talk a little bit about why I chose this topic to talk about. And the way I like to start off a lot of talks like this when I don't know how to start is with a question. Maybe you're familiar with this. And so this is kind of a thought experiment for everybody watching, for us. And the question is, what's the most challenging part of developing software in an organization? And I think at least part of the answer to that is communication, right? Communicating what we're working on, right? Communicating that what you've just done, what you're going to do, is extremely important, right? And we need tools that help us do that. Because there's more communication going on today and more software developers today using more tools today than there ever have been in the past. So there's more communication, and we need tools that allow us to do that in a sane way, right? And I think a kind of humorous illustration of this need is this slide from the Cloud Native Computing Foundation, which I find, in a way, it's kind of funny because it attempts to capture the landscape of all the different tools that we might use today as developers. And you might need a magnifying glass to figure out what's actually going on in all of these. And my basic point is just that there are so many tools that we use today. There's a proliferation of different tools, and they all require that we know what's going on at some level. Like, different teams are all using these different tools, and they're all trying to work together. But what we need is actually not just another tool to communicate. So I made this slide because I wanted to illustrate that it's not just about adding another tool. Adding another tool may make this picture more complicated, but it doesn't necessarily help you do anything better, right? I think we've all worked at places that had all of the right tools, but none of the right processes, right? So it's not just about what you're using. And that brings me to why I chose to talk about InnerSourcing, because I think it's a great illustration of the principle of not just being about tools, but also being about how you use the tools, the process by which you use them, okay? And InnerSource, just to quickly define it, if anybody's not familiar, it's a little bit, it's a newer concept, but it's certainly not something that folks wouldn't be familiar with. So it's merely the idea of taking successful and productive practices from the open source world and applying them inside of your own company, right? And that could be 1,000 different specific things, but it's just the idea of looking at projects that you might use on GitHub today, right? That you contribute to today, that are doing things that are encouraging people to contribute, or something that's really cool that you could be using inside of your company.
So let me see if I understand this, because I looked at InnerSource and I was thinking, oh, is this another picture we're going to add to that whole picture of development? It's not. You're saying these are ideas that have been taken from successful open source projects, and because there's a lot of them.
Yes.
And you've watched them because you work at GitHub. You've watched them, and you're saying here are some of the principles that they use in order to make their open source project successful on GitHub, and you're going to explain like what those are. I mean, I have an open source project, and I feel like it's far from successful because of some of the issues with communication, as you mentioned.
Yes, so I'm going to be talking about a few of those ideas and how you can start applying those to your organization. And the critical thing is that it's all about studying what works in open source and applying that, mapping that into your organization. So it's not about taking exactly what folks do in the open source world. It doesn't always translate into how things are done in a company. And that can be good and it can be bad. So there are trade-offs there. But it's about applying those specific principles. So that's why I'd like to make sure that people come away with today with an idea and some inspiration to actually go out there and look at how their organization works and think about some of these ideas around communication and how they're using tools and building processes. Because effective communication, I'll say that doesn't happen by accident, right? It takes a lot of intention and planning to make sure that you're in the right environment to do that.
All right, well, I want to dig into the principles here.
Yeah. So just quickly, I'll just show this slide of why InnerSource. I think we've covered a lot of this, and I don't need to belabor the point here. But this is basically just a rundown of why you'd want to do this, right? More contributions, more quickly, higher quality. So it's doing more with less. And just a really quick example of this that folks can go check out. This is a graph from Illyriad Games. They worked on Age of Ascent. So the team there radically improved the performance of .NET Core over the course of a few months. They actually got a cake from the .NET team. They did such a good job. But I just wanted to throw this out there as an example of what is possible when you open up what people are able to contribute to your projects, right? So I'm not promising that all of your projects are going to be 2,300% faster. No, that's not going to happen. But I can say that this is the potential. So there is an Illyriad Games within all of the companies that we work at that can be unlocked. It's just about setting up the right success, the right environment for success.
Got it.
Yeah. Cool. So, I have one more slide. I think this is the ultimate payoff. Like, this is why folks should care about inner sourcing and DevOps, right? So DevOps, I saw a really cool definition of DevOps, that it's something that accelerates your ability to deliver applications and services, right? And by that definition, the practices that you apply with open source definitely fall under that. And we can see where those overlap with this, it's a very cool developer enjoying a nice drink under a shady tree, right? So this is the idea. This is why I think this is exciting for developers, because it has the potential to make your life better.
Yeah, anything that improves my practice of communicate. Because literally, all software is a communication problem.
Yes.
Like I've had many software failures, and they all come down to I understood the things wrong. And so I'm excited for any principles you have on how to make this better.
Awesome. Yeah, so that's all my slides. So hopefully that set the stage for what I'm going to be talking about within my demo here. So why don't we dive in?
Let's do it.
Cool. So this is my GitHub organization. This is often the first place that folks will see, and you can see I have a few repositories that have been created in here. So the repository that we're going to be looking at in a couple minutes is this Java calculator repository, and you can see a couple others that I just put up for fun. Elk Terraform, Java calculator that's powered by a Habitat. So just a shout out to our other presenters today. These aren't real working examples, but this might be in an organization. So the first thing that I want to point out is the different visibility levels of repositories. So there's private and public repositories. And that's the most basic level of visibility control that you can have. So if you want everyone to be able to see your project and contribute to it, public is good. If you want to control who can access it through teams, private. And I'm using a GitHub Enterprise instance, so I can control who is able to access this URL. So folks need to sign in before they can look at anything. So it's actually okay for me to keep things public. It just means that they're public to my organization.
Got it.
In Octodemo. In github.com, the situation's a little bit different. If you want to keep something private, so if a company wants to keep a project private on github.com, it has to be private, right?
Awesome.
So anything on github.com that's public is open to the world.
So this enterprise is just an instance of the software that you have running as a demo purposes.
That's right.
By the way, for those that are watching, please make sure if you have any questions, use hashtag Azure OpenDev. We are monitoring the questions, and so we want to hear what you have to say as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you. That's right. Where was I?
You were in the middle of saying that on GitHub, the situation is a little bit different.
Yes.
Because if you want something to be private, it has
Yes.
to be private.
Yes.
Here, it's a situation where it's kind of private to all of your organization, but then you can make things private for a subset of your organization as well.
Exactly. Yeah, so if people who are watching were to go to octodemo.com, they would have to log in. They wouldn't be able to see this. So something to note with the visibility of repositories. And then one thing that I'd like to point out within an organization, beyond the repository visibility, is the default member or the default repository permissions for members. So by default, you can set certain levels of access for organization members. In very open organizations, this might be set to write. So everybody that's added to the organization can write to all of the repositories. And that can be a really powerful model for collaboration, right? So everybody by default can write to things, but it can also be dangerous. Read, similar situation. Everybody gets read access to every repository, whether it's public or private. Typically, organizations choose none. That gives you the most control over what folks are able to see. So that's usually what folks go with. So that's default repository permissions. And I also want to show teams here as well. So teams are how you organize access to your repositories. So they're very important. And I think it's worth spending a little bit of time explain something a little bit newer. So you can see there's a few teams listed here. So there's a couple secret teams, which I'll talk about in a moment. And then there's this employees team with this tab here, and then a few other teams. So the first thing that I want to show is this nested team. So nested teams are something we introduced recently that can help you organize, or rather put folks into more logical groupings in terms of your teams. So you can see I expanded the parent and child teams here to show what's actually going on. And what's great about organizing your members in this way is that if I wanted to give read access to or write access to a certain repository to all employees, so let me just open a new tab and do that. So if I wanted to change the ability of all of the people in the employees team to write, I would just have to change that in one place. So it's much simpler than going to a dozen different teams and assigning them. It allows you to cascade all of those permissions down, right?
And this is in enterprise edition. Is this something you can do in the public one as well in GitHub?
This is in github.com and GitHub Enterprise.
Oh, I did not know that.
Yes.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a really powerful way of just organizing people.
Yeah. So it allows you to reflect your organization to the extent that it makes sense inside of GitHub.
I see.
So rather than having multiple organizations, which can definitely make collaboration more difficult and visibility harder, you can have a single organization with nested teams that reflect your engineering structure, typically, since that's who is mostly dealing with GitHub.
And that goes back to the notion of communication, because
Yes.
if you have to communicate with two people, there's just one line. If it's three, then there's 3 lines, or 4, there's 6, right? There's choose 2 lines of communication. If you start to break up like where people naturally communicate into teams, that makes the communication a little bit easier as well.
Yes.
Cool.
Yes, and the layout of the teams, I think it's hard to understate how important the teams and their structure become to how people are able to access repositories that are owned by the organization. So, and this is what I was referring to when I was talking about taking a lot of thought and foresight and planning. Many organizations grow organically without people thinking about, well, who should have access to this? So I think it's important to plan that out so you can actually say, well, maybe why don't all our engineers have access to this project, like our main code base,
Right.
for example? Everybody should have access to that. But I think the concern with that kind of model is what is possible. Like, what are the downsides that we open ourselves up to by allowing that kind of creativity? And that's what I'm going to show inside of the repository.
Cool.
So how you can open it up to more collaboration without compromising the quality or making sure that people don't overwrite the history of the repository, for example.
Yeah, I have. There's some things on GitHub that I've done with Git in general, where I'm just like, I think I just destroyed everything, but I hope not. Yeah. So so it's better to be safe about those kind of things too.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. Really quickly, I just want to talk about these other teams. So we looked at this employees nested team, and I just want to show you 2 other types of teams. So there's this secret team, and a secret team can only be seen or mentioned by members of that team, right? So other people in the organization that aren't members, so anybody who's not Ryan or Kylo, don't know about 007, the team, and nobody outside of that team can mention it. So this can be great if you have projects that are sensitive, if you have contractors, whatever the case may be, where you want to isolate the visibility and access that other people have to that team. So those are secret teams, and I have another secret team that's just for bots. And the three teams at the end, I just want to mention as this is something a colleague of mine, Greg Paddock, referred to as ad hoc teams, right? So there's the official organization of your company, and then there's what people are actually interested in, or what they're experts in within that. And this is what teams and ad hoc teams in GitHub are great for. So I have a few here. One for Node.js enthusiasts. And what's really cool about this is that this cuts across all of the different cross-division and cross-department areas that we have. So there are people from different teams within, or rather from different engineering groups within technology who are all part of this Node.js team. So it cuts across different silos and allows you to create places where you have concentrated knowledge on Seinfeld, maybe not as useful, or sweet potatoes, or Node.js.
And that's interesting, because then when you have certain things that come up, like if people are talking about, let's just say you're working on a certain feature and you're just like, hey, let me just tag the Node.js enthusiasts to come take a look at this. Can you tag them all at the same time and then have them comment on these things too?
Yeah, so if they're in a team, then you just mention the team, and they automatically become part of the conversation.
And that's awesome,
so
because then you can have the functional teams, and then you can have the cross-cutting teams that can be brought in, as necessary, because obviously they have other work. But if they love Node.js, heck, let's just take a look at this particular issue that people are having in this other team. That's awesome.
Yep. So ad hoc teams, nested teams, secret teams. These are all the building blocks that you can use to make sure that folks have access to the right things within your organization. Cool. So with that, I'm actually going to go show the app that we're working on. So the repository I'm going to be demoing with is this Java calculator repository. So super complex code base. It can do all kinds of operations.
Sure.
Addition, subtraction.
Yeah, the main ones.
Yeah. And it also has a REST API. So this is a Java app that gets deployed out to an Azure app. And is running out there. So you can see I just have the ping endpoint over here. So yeah, this is my repository. So let's imagine for a moment that I just opened this repository up to everybody in the organization, right? I just added this to the employees team and gave everybody write permission. But now that that's happened, I'm getting kind of nervous. What if somebody deletes the last 50 commits and then force pushes it, or breaks the build and then that goes out to production? Like this is just being deployed out into production.
So it's CI/CD'd already, and so if people write to it, they might write something crazy.
Right now there's no CI.
Okay.
So it's just whether it's broken, whether it's working, it's just going out there.
So not as scary.
Well, it's continuously deploying or continuously deploying failure, as the case may be. The issue is that right now I don't have any way of knowing whether, I don't have any unit tests written in this repository right now, so I have no idea of whether anything's been broken or not.
Cool.
So I think the first thing that I want to point out in this repository is the existence of this README file. So this is really important. And you can see it's actually displayed down at the bottom here. If you've looked at a GitHub repository, I'm sure you've seen this before. And the README is really important because it's the entry point for people into your project. So this is usually the first thing that someone's going to look at. So it's important that after they look at this, that they know how to run the project, that they know where to look if they want to contribute something, if they find something wrong. And this is a good example of a README because it has that basic information there. So it has a description of what the project is at the top. And it also has a link to this contributing.md file, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a moment. But those are guidelines around if you want to open an issue or make a contribution, how do you go about that, right? And then it has all the instructions that you need to actually start building this and running it locally, right? So those are really important, great to have. And there's a few different files. They're kind of GitHub metadata files, I guess you could call them, stored in this repository that I want to talk about for a moment. So I already mentioned the contributing file. And this is important because it's a more detailed explanation of how you want people to contribute to your project. So it's aspirational. This is what an ideal issue that's opened would have. So you can see that this document directs people, where they can ask questions on Stack Overflow or IRC, how they can file issues, as well as a few guidelines around what they should have done before they actually file an issue. And then at the bottom, there's more details around what to do if you actually want to contribute. And I think at the end, the section on feedback is also great because it gives people an idea of what they should expect after they submit something. So it kind of paves the way for people to contribute and makes sure that there's no, or minimizes the amount of surprise or confusion that people go through in common paths.
So I have like a couple questions on this because I'm looking at this and this is amazing. First of all, the .github file, is that a convention or the .github folder, is that a convention we should follow and just have those things in there?
So that's a convention that you can use to store these files. So let me just go back and show. So these are all files that have to do with GitHub specifically. So we make it easy to store those in a hidden folder in the repository that doesn't clutter things. But you can keep all of these in here. So they can live in the root of your repository. I like to keep them in a folder to keep them a little bit more organized.
Got it. And then the other question is, when we're talking about issue template and pull request template, those documents are just saying what you should do during a pull request, or does it help you create them, or what are those for? Yeah,
so I can show you what those actually do really quickly. So there's already an issue open about adding unit tests to the repository. We don't need to look at that right now. But here's where those templates actually come into play.
This is amazing.
Yeah, so this up at the top, you can see there's a link to the contributing guidelines that I was talking about earlier. And the issue template file that was in that .github folder has actually populated this entire issue with a template. And the markdown file is just that. It's just markdown. But you can see I actually used HTML comments in here as well. So Markdown supports HTML. So you can actually get pretty sophisticated with the formatting if you want to. But I just use it so I can provide instructions in the template without having that actually show up if people submit it without filling it out. But this is what you can do. So you can define all of the major areas that you want people to fill out, and then actually have that in the issue when it's open.
That's pretty amazing because I usually get a lot of it doesn't work, and I have no idea what they're talking about. This here, just in a social way, is saying, hey, look, and the thing I like about this is when you're creating an issue, like that isn't a contribution. And so I love how you say, before you open an issue, let's talk about what it means to contribute. Here's something that we would like to see. And socially, you're not hitting people over the head saying, well, you didn't tell me anything. Right? Beforehand, the computer's gently nudging people to communicate a little bit better, which I really like.
Yes. Yeah, it's removing some of the element of you needing to ask someone to do that and putting that in front of them so they know what to do.
I love it. Well, we have about 6 or 7 minutes. I want to cut you off, but this to me is probably one of the coolest things I've seen.
Yeah.
You already probably knew about this, but I didn't. And so if you're not using this, definitely we should start looking at it.
It's new for a lot of people, so don't feel bad if this is new. Cool. So since we only have about 5 or 6 minutes, I think I'm gonna skip ahead to showing a few of the protected branch settings. So how you can actually, how you can make sure that quality doesn't suffer, that people don't accidentally remove things when you're working in your repository. So the two options that I'm primarily concerned with, the first option is to protect the branch, right? So if you protect your master branch, let me go back one screen. So protected branches you can configure for any branch in your repository. Typically people do that for their master branch,
right,
since that's what's going out to production, what you're cutting releases from. So once you're protecting your master branch, which is the baseline for what you would like to do, that disables force pushing, so people can't alter the history of the Git repository, and they can't delete commits, which is a good start, right? But there's two other options that are also really important. So require pull request reviews before merging can be great for making sure that humans are actually looking at code before it's being submitted, right? So when somebody opens a pull request, they must have somebody else review it and approve it before they can actually submit it, right? So that's an excellent practice for encouraging code review because people have to do it, right?
Sure.
And there's a few options around here that make this either more flexible or more useful. I think the most interesting option is the require review from code owners. And that uses the code owners file, which I didn't have time to show. But it uses the code owners file to determine who to request for review. So let me just show the code owners file really quickly. So it's just either files or paths or wildcards in your repository, and then teams. And when you open a pull request, we look at what files have changed, and then we'll automatically request review from the right team, from the matching, from whatever matches we get from code owners.
I feel like I've been using GitHub wrong for many years. I mean, seriously, this is amazing.
This is also new. So again, don't feel bad if this is new.
No, I'll feel bad because then I'll fix it, right? That's the best part.
So yeah, code owners are great. And the second thing that's really important is requiring status checks to pass before merging. So this allows you to actually kick out your, you build your repository in your CI system, and then the result of that build is sent back into GitHub, and it's displayed in the PR. So you can actually see, did the build pass or fail? And if it failed, it's actually not possible to merge in your pull request if a required status, so I have this second status here marked as required. If that doesn't return successfully from Jenkins, I will not be able to merge that, right? The merge button will not be available.
Right.
So that's how I keep contributions from breaking things. That's how you can put some guardrails around what folks are able to put into the repository.
Right.
Yep.
So we have about 2 more minutes. Can you do whirlwind through a couple of other things that we should look at?
So let me save this. This is actually going to be, let's see if I can show you this. So I have code open here. I'm going to clone my repository. I'm going to make a branch. And then I need my terminal. If only writing tests in the real world were this easy.
Right.
So I've added my tests, right? It's done.
Nice. I love the hand waving. Like he's literally waving his hands right now, but we didn't put that on because it looked ugly. Just no offense, right?
I'm waving my hands all over the place. Thanks for telling everybody.
No, but this is good because I think the important part is I want to see how this actually goes into the workflow of what you're doing.
Yes. So I'm just committing this locally, and now I'm pushing it up to my branch. And I'm switching to another window where I'm logged in as just a normal developer, as Ryan. Cool. So I can actually see that this was pushed up. And you can see the PR template actually populated all of this. So let's create this so I can actually see what's going on. So really quickly, you can see that under the reviewers, the quality team was requested for review. And you can see because of the setting, my repository setting that I made, code owner review is actually required here. So I cannot merge this until somebody from the quality team says, all right, this looks good. And additionally, required status check has also failed. The test that I coded intentionally had a failure.
That's what you get for hand waving. I'm
Yep.
just saying.
I was waving with one hand and I typed a 5 instead of a 4. So you can also see that this red box merging is blocked because of that. So that's the 2-minute finale of all of that.
Oh, and that's amazing. So here's a couple of questions from the audience. As this is Azure OpenDev, what is an easy way to discover all of the Azure-related repositories on GitHub for searching and finding things? How do you do that?
So there's actually a lot of great Azure organizations out there. So if you can use the search qualifier for organizations and look for Azure, there's a lot of official Azure orgs out there. I would also check out topics. So similarly, if you use the search qualifier for topics, there are many repositories on GitHub that have been tagged with something called topics. So I actually have an example of that in the repository I have here. So topics are below the description of a repository, right? And these allow you, I can actually show you in GitHub what this might look like.
Oh, snap. I did.
Right.
I said, oh, snap. I'm so sorry, Ashley. I'm sorry.
So these are all the different repositories that have been tagged with Azure, right? So this is a cool way of exploring the different repositories that are out there on github.com. So there are about 1,200, so whoever asked that, they have a few things to look at now.
Awesome. Well, this has been amazing. Ryan Parks, we are going to be new BFFs. I'm going to be calling him at night being like, hey, help me.
You're getting a shirt.
It's
coming. It's on its
I'm
way.
going to put a shirt on it. He's giving me a shirt, okay? So it's official. We made it official.